You scheduled 3 consultations this week for that divorce attorney, which you've been pushing off for a while. But now you're getting serious and you're bringing all that energy. And you never really hired an attorney before. I mean, you might have hired an attorney for like a real estate closing, but you never hired an attorney like this. And also, you're confused. You're anxious and you're worried. You didn't have to disclose basically your financial situation, your whole life story, your secrets to a real estate attorney, but you're going to have to do that for your divorce attorney. So you really want to make sure this person you pick is going to really be on your side. You need some help. Well, if that's how you feel, this is the episode for you. We've been talking about the 4 attorney styles, but this episode is about how to find the right attorney for you and what's important to you. So let me give you a story to illustrate what we're going to be talking about. But before I give you that story, I just want to give you 2 ideas to think about when you're hiring an attorney. The first type of an attorney is what we're going to call an expert for hire, or a yes man. They tell you what you want to hear. They don't necessarily challenge your positions. The second type of an attorney is what we're going to be called the trusted advisor. That type of attorney may challenge your position. They may try to make you think differently. So think about those 2 groupings of attorneys as I tell you this story. The first example is a financial example. And let's say you want $5,000 a month in monthly support. But when you talk to the attorney, they tell you that the law is about $2,000 a month. And if you look at your expenses, it's about $2,500 a month. Now, if you have the expert for hire, they're going to say, go for it. Get that $5,000 a month. Why not? And if you are talking to the trusted advisor, they're going to say, I'm a little worried about this. It's a risky position. The law says $2,000. Your expenses are $2,500. It's going to be hard to justify all that. And I don't want you to throw good money after bad. See the difference? Now, let me give you another example in the custody realm to show you how this works. Let's say that you want sole legal custody. Legal custody is decision-making. And let's say you want that because throughout the marriage, that's what you did. You had a very passive spouse, childcare, child rearing, all that was basically your responsibility. And whatever you did, they went with. So if you speak to the expert for hire, the yes man, they're going to say, go for it. You've been making all these decisions all the time. Get the sole legal. And maybe there's some bad blood in the relationship about getting divorced. And that's meaningful to you. But let's say you also, same situation, you also ask about this with a trusted advisor. They're going to say, when you're married, you know what you really have? You have joint custody. And in that joint custody framework, you made all the decisions. So in effect, you had sole decision making. I'm not hearing any objections the other side did to you. They trust you as a parent. But if we make this a thing, the other side may get defensive. If we request sole legal custody, the other side may feel disenfranchised. And now we're creating a war when no war is needed. Maybe a move would be just joint legal custody and make this a non-issue. See the 2 different perspectives? Now, with that in mind, let's put our lawyer hat on. You're interviewing lawyers, so let's think about this. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is something that you're going to experience when you hire a lawyer, which is the retainer. That's a financial relationship with your attorney. And most attorneys still bill by the hour, and they ask for a sort of a credit. It's called a retainer payment, but it's a credit up front against future hours. So if your attorney billed out at $500 an hour and they took $10,000, they're asking for those number of hours in advance. And that's how most attorneys work, right? The only problem, like the fine print, I'm here to give you the fine print. This is client school. Judges go to judge school. You need to go to client school. And here's what they don't tell you. The first bill that you receive, and they have to itemize your bill in most jurisdictions, and it should be itemized, you might not get it for 30 to 60 days. And not all, but some attorneys may just exhaust that retainer payment and then make a request for an additional payment before you even had a chance to see what they've been doing. Now, this is okay if you trust your attorney, you should trust your attorney, but as smarter people than me said, I think it was Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. And how do you verify? Well, before you develop real trust, what I would suggest is have them issue invoices weekly so you can see what's really going on, and don't ignore it. I know it's stressful. I know it's difficult. When I started my business, I was not a business person. I was a lawyer developing my craft. And do you think I looked at my expenses? No, because I was focused on my case. Now I look at everything to see what's going on. And that's what you have to do. That first week, you look at the bills and you see what's going on. If something looks fishy, you ask them. And most attorneys don't charge, and they shouldn't charge for discussing the bill. Another type of attorney does a flat fee, which I think is where most attorneys are going to move to, but it's just starting this out. And the reason is because the hourly fee rewards activity, and the flat fee it brings you certainty, and also it gives you much more clarity about controlling expenses in your matter. All right, the next thing I want you to think about is this idea of being locked into your attorney. You spent all that time, you got someone you trusted, and hope it's a great relationship. But maybe it's not. In most states, it's not hard to get out of the attorney-client relationship. You can always change counsel. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it happens. And think about this. Back all those years ago when I was in high school, it seemed like the dream ticket was to get into an Ivy League school. And if your friend got into an Ivy League school and you didn't, you felt bad. You felt great for them, but like, wow, I'm not going to Ivy League. But I had a friend who was very competitive. Problem was they didn't have the grades or the scores to get into an Ivy League. And what they did is they talked to their college advisor, and they found out that there's more than one way to get into an Ivy League. And you don't have to get it in through the front door. You can get in through the back door. And all they had to do was go to the community college, get great grades, and then transfer. And that's exactly what they did. But to tell people you're going to a community college when your friends are going to Ivy League is not the most pleasant thing to say, especially when you're a teenager and especially where you feel you have low status. But do you think this person cares? Because 20 years later, when people ask them where they graduate from, they can say, Ivy League school. And that's what I want you to think about when you're hiring an attorney. You don't have to hire the biggest and baddest attorney. I want you to hire someone that you trust, because 95% of cases settle, and maybe you don't need to have this type of attorney who has amazing cross-examination skills or can destroy the other side. Maybe you don't need all that power. Maybe it's better just to hire someone who can get the job done in a reasonable way and save you a lot of time, energy, and frustration. Let's just think about those 4 attorney styles we talked about in the last few episodes and what it would be like if you hired one of them. So let's just go through each of them. First, if you hire the swarmer, what you'll probably see in the bill is just a lot of activity. And you have to wonder if the activity is meaningful. Is it doing something? And that's the questions you would have with the swarmer. And maybe it does have a purpose, but you got to figure it out. If you hire a brawler, you're probably not going to get the hand-holding you may want. But if you ever go to court with a brawler, you'll feel very protected, right? So they're like the surgeon. It's like, talk to my nurse. I do my job, and all I'm thinking about is destroying people in court. But if you want to just like chat, that's not something I really do. Okay. Okay. So that's the brawler. If you hire someone who suggests mediation and being collaborative and is thinking things more rationally and trying to resolve things and de-escalate things, that may be a boxer. And if you're having a meeting with the other side, and in-person meeting, not just virtual, and you're in like a 30 seat conference room that's beautiful with soaring ceilings and all the latest technology, that's probably a top dog. That's probably a top dog. So think about this. This is the core message. The right attorney helps you see clearly when you can't. Again, this is like client school. Judges have judge school. No one gives you client school. You're the president. You got to make better decisions. But who teaches the president to make better decisions? There is no school for that. That's what this school's for. You have to have good advisors. But you make the decision. And then your general carries out what you want to accomplish. All right, so let's talk about our action steps. And here's 3 questions you could ask this potential attorney. First, you could ask, what would the court likely do? And if they give you pushback, well, it depends on the judge, I don't know. Well, who are the judges? And if we got this judge, because you might get different judges, in smaller jurisdictions, it's maybe just 1 or 2 judges. In larger jurisdictions, there may be like New York City, there's a lot of judges. And they do rule differently. It's like going to a parent. Different parents have different beliefs. So one judge may do this, one judge may do that. But a good attorney should know generally, or at least look up case law, what this judge decided. So what would a court likely do? And then you will know if you're making a decision that's risky or the judge already supported. And sometimes you can move the judge. You just have to have the budget for that. Just remember that. Okay. The second thing you could ask this attorney is, who's their ideal client? If they don't know, if they don't tell you, like anyone who can pay the retainer, that's not true. There's an ideal client for your attorney, and you want to hear if that resonates for you. If it doesn't, move on. All right, the third thing is you can ask them, what are you known for? They can't be known for everything. Even top restaurants are known for a certain dish. What are you known for? Can they tell you? If they're for everyone, then they're probably for no one. And there are some attorneys who are just such good advocates that they can take any side. And that might be what they're known for. They can take any side, but let them tell you that. This is a big time for you to hire an attorney, and you're growing in your skills as his president, making decisions, and this is one of your first decisions you have to make. But remember, you can always change this decision. It's not like when you enter into a settlement. If you enter into a settlement where you sign it and you can't come back because you think you had a bad deal, it's over. But here, thankfully, your first decision, you can always change it if you make a bad decision. All right, so next episode, we're going to discuss mediation and collaborative. This is where you might not need to go the traditional route. I know this podcast is about getting divorced without losing your mind, but sometimes people can go into the mediation and collaborative space, and collaborative attorneys are just attorneys who don't go to court through what I call the front door in the beginning, when everyone agrees to do it, or more likely than not, if you're listening to this podcast, through what I call the back door, when you've gone to court, where you've expended the resources, where you're in this puzzle, and you've been doing that for years, and the court forcing you basically. If the court was here, they would say they don't force you. They would say they suggested, but it feels like a force to go to mediation to try to work things out. And sometimes the court's right, because if you speak to a very good mediator, they can cut through a lot of things. You also see that in commercial cases where people settle right before trial through mediation. And that's what we're going to discuss next time. All right, I'm Corey Shapiro. This is the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. Let's step forward with clarity together.
This podcast offers general information only. It cannot replace legal advice. If you need tailored advice, contact an attorney licensed to practice in your area.